All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about loops. Now, we saw this earlier when we talked about arrays. So let's just recap what we talked about before. So maybe I have this array that's called colors, and in here I have 3 colors, and I want to loop over each one of them. So for each colors as color, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to echo out the color and the line break. A very simple application. This is our first loop. It's a for each loop, and it takes something that's iterable. In this case, an array is iterable, so you're able to iterate from one element to another element. It's going to index into this array, and every time it goes through it, it'll start with the first element and set this value of the first element, and then it'll set the variable color to the value of the second element on the second loop, and then it'll do one more loop in this case, and the value of the variable color will be set to blue. So if we run this, I get the 3 colors echoed out to the screen. That's an example of a for each loop, but there's other ways that we can loop through here. We can also do a for loop, and a for loop is I have some variable I from 0 to, let's go, I is less than, say, 10, for example. And so this is the basic syntax of a for loop. So I have a variable I. It's going to get initialized to the value of 0. If the value is less than 10, it's going to do whatever's in this code block. And then at the end of every iteration, it's going to increment. This is plus plus, which is an increment operator. So it's going to increment that value by 1. If I echo out $I, we'll see what this shows us. I'm expecting the first time through the loop, it's going to start at 0. And then the second time through the loop, it'll be incremented by plus 1. So it'll be 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. When it gets up to 8, the next time through the loop, it'll be 9. It's still less than 10. And then at the end of that loop, it'll be 10. It will not be less than 10 anymore. It'll be equal to 10. And then it'll break out of this loop. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. And so now you can see our second loop here, 0 through 9 right there. And just so we keep everything on the page, I'm going to go ahead and just set this to maybe 3. Let's rerun it at 3. And I get 0, 1, and 2. Now, one of the things I'm going to introduce here is the size of an array. So how many elements are in this array? We're going to introduce a variable called numColors, and we're going to count the number of colors, just like that. So this function is a PHP function, and it counts the number of elements that are in some iterable type of variable. Colors, it's an array, so it's iterable. It'll just give you a count, and it's going to return an integer. Now what we can do with this is obviously we can echo it out. So if we echo out numColors, let's go ahead, it'll add that to our output over here. So you can see here, numColors is 3. There's 3 colors. So if I wanted to, I can introduce a loop now that's using maybe the same variable I, but we could call it a different variable. And it's going to be while C is less than the num of colors, I can increment it, and I can echo out the color that's associated with that index. This is combining a couple of things here. So first of all, this for loop is almost exactly the same as this for loop. On the very top, I initialize it at 0. numColors is dynamic. It's created up here by counting out how many elements are in here, and this is the value of 3. So we saw this earlier, so this has a value of 3 in this case. This is the same thing as me putting a 3 here, but I don't want to hardwire this as a 3 because maybe someday I'm going to add another color here. I don't know, pink. And so I don't want to have this hard-coded. I want to handle that array dynamically. I don't want to necessarily just have 3 elements. I could have 4. It could be 100 elements. Using this dynamic number, I'm able to loop over all the colors, and then I'll put the page break in there. And I'm just going to remove pink so that we just keep it consistent. And let's run this now. Now you can see the first time I printed red, green, blue, that was from the for each. And then I got the 0, 1, and 2. That's my middle for loop here. And now I've got this red, green, and blue, which is from this loop here. This for loop is replicating exactly the same thing as this for each loop. All right, so let's clean this back up a little bit. Let's go ahead and comment out maybe these last 4 loops here. Let's come back up to our for each loop. And I'm just going to refresh this. We should just get the initial red, green, and blue. Inside of a loop, we can have certain things happen. The default structure is this. So it will loop over every single item, and it'll do exactly what we see here. But maybe you don't want to do this if the color is green. We can have something here. We say if this color is green. So we talked about Booleans and conditionals in one of the previous videos. If the color is green, I don't want to do anything. I just want to skip this thing. So I could do it like this. I could say if the color is maybe not green, so that means it's anything other than green, then what I want to do is move this inside here. This is certainly valid syntax. So now I've got an if statement inside my for each loop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out every single color as long as it's not equal to green. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So you can see I have 3 elements, but I'm only printing red and blue. Now if I switch this to equals, you'll see it. I have 3 elements, but now I'm only printing green. You can definitely add conditionals inside of here. Another way that you can do this is, let me move the echo statement down. Let's say if it's equal to green, I'm going to introduce a new keyword, but we're going to have the keyword continue. What that word means is as I'm processing the loop, I got color, whatever the color is. If it's green, continue means don't do anything below this. Just jump back to the top of the loop and process the next color. So essentially we're skipping the color green. That's what this means essentially. We're skipped to the top of the loop. So continue to the top of the loop. If I run this, what we should see is it's going to loop over all the different colors. If it's green, it's going to go to the top. It's never going to get to this echo statement. So you can see indeed it prints red, it prints blue, but it does not print green. And there's another keyword that we can use inside here. Let's say this. If it's red, we're going to use another keyword called break. What break means is we're breaking out of the loop. So think about what this is going to do here. So it's going to loop over all the different colors. That's the top part. If it runs into green, it's going to skip back to the top and it's going to go to the next color, which will be blue. But if it's not green, it's going to come down here. If it's red, it's going to hit this break statement, which means we're going to skip out of this altogether and we're going to end up down here. And it's going to end up outside the for loop and run the rest of the code, which is all commented out. All right, so let's see what this does. And you can see it just printed the count, which is outside. So we echo out the count. And the very first color is red. And so as we get down through this if, it doesn't get inside this if. It gets inside this if and it runs that break command. It breaks out of the for loop and it doesn't process any more colors at that point. These are 2 keywords to know inside of loops, are continue and break. I'm going to comment all of that out. Let's talk about another kind of loop. What we're going to talk about is something called a while loop. And a while loop has this format. So we're going to have while and some expression in here. And again, in a Boolean expression, it has to be true or false. While whatever this condition is true, it's going to run whatever is inside of this while loop. And now you got to be careful with these while loops because all the loops we've seen so far have a predetermined end. This will end when the number of colors is met. Like for example, a for each is going to end when you run out of colors. This for loop is going to end when it's less than 3. This for loop is going to end when it's less than num colors. So far, it's been kind of safe. It's never just gone on and on and on. If I were to create something like this, we're inside that loop, and while this is true, it's going to echo that. So if I were to run this, I'm going to end up with an infinite loop, and let's just see what it does. And I've let this go for a little bit of time. You can see it's not completing. It's just spinning. Here's my title at the very top, loops. And then inside of each of these loop, I'm printing loop. And you can see it's just going on and on and on. In order for this thing to stop, I'm going to have to hit the stop key. And that really doesn't really stop it. So I'm going to have to restart my server. And then the kit, I can say kit down. And that'll shut everything down. And it'll stop that request. Now that request eventually would have timed out. So I really didn't have to do this. But I just want to show you how to restart the server. So you can see kit back up. Now it's going to run it again. I don't want to click run again because I'll be in that same situation. So let's make this a not an infinite loop. Maybe have some variable outside here. And let's start it at 0. And inside, I want to echo the number. And then I want to use one of my conditionals. So if something happens, I want to break out of that loop. So if, let's say, I is greater than or equal to, say 10, I'm going to break out of this loop. So this is a simple while that will loop over I. There's one more thing I have to add in here for it to really work, but it's going to echo it out. If it's greater than or equal to 10, it's going to break it out. But at the end, I have to increase I by a certain number. So if I want to increment it by 1, I can use this shortcut. I can also do it like this in PHP. All right, or I could write this. Those are all equivalent ways. Each one of these, they're all equivalent. I only need one of them. I'm just going to use the one that's shorter, and so we're going to do it like this. I initialize I with 0, and I have this while loop that will run forever until it hits this break statement. Okay, so this is certainly one way that I could write this. I'm going to run this, and you can see 0 all the way up through 10 inclusive. As soon as it's greater than or equal to 10, it'll break out of it, but I've already printed that number. So this certainly is one way to do this, but we have this expression that's part of the while loop. So instead of having this expression inside the while loop, I could have it outside the while loop. So really what I'm trying to say is this is while I, it's less than or equal to 10. I want to do whatever's inside the loop. And so I can go ahead and get rid of this condition, and I'm going to rerun this, and I should get the same thing. And indeed I do. So you can see that right there. And of course, you can do whatever you want inside these loops. So maybe instead of echoing, the number itself, you want to use that number and compute something. Maybe you're going to compute the square. I can take I and I can multiply it by I. Oh, misspelled it, square. There we go. And maybe you echo out instead of the thing, maybe you echo out then the number squared equals square. And we can get rid of this first echo. So you can do whatever you want inside these loops. Here I'm just doing a little bit of math, and you can see that. Let's take a look at a third way that we can do a loop. So our last loop, we used this while, and I'm going to go ahead and comment that out. And then we're going to introduce a do loop. So a do has this format. So it takes a code block, then there's the operand at the very bottom. Now this operand, this expression, this is what tells if the loop is going to continue or not. So if this expression is true, it's going to continue to do the loop. One of the main differences between a while loop and a do loop is if you look here, the while loop has its expression at the very top. So this expression could be false the very first time you hit the loop, and it never gets executed. However, in a do loop, the expression is in the bottom. The do loop will always get executed at least once. The expression will be evaluated, and if it's true, it'll continue to execute that loop. Otherwise, it won't. So do loops are always executed once, at least. A while loop could execute maybe not even once. So let's recreate this. We're going to copy this code, and we're going to put this inside of our do loop. And let me just uncomment it all. And then we're going to put the expression right here. So this do loop should be equivalent to our while loop that was down here. So I'm going to run this, save it, and then I'll run it. And I'm not expecting any change in the output over here, except for that. So I forgot to define the variable. So it's good that we see errors every once in a while. And my IDE actually underscores this. It says, hey, there's a variable that's not defined. I just need to define this variable first, and I'll run that loop again. And now I get back exactly what I started with. This loop is equivalent to the while loop. Now there's one more thing I want to cover here. This iterator, again, we talked about this before. This is equivalent to plus or equals 1. So I'm adding 1 to something. Or it's also equivalent to this expression here where I'm setting I equal to I plus 1. Those are all equivalent. This is just a shorthand notation. If you want to increment by 1, it's an increment operator. Plus plus is the increment operator. Now I don't have to increment in this loop always by 1. I can't use the increment operator if I want to do another number. So I can get rid of this. And if I want to do every other number, I could use the plus equals 2. And so if I run this now, I should end up with every other number. So I got 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And that same is true for all these other loops. So this plus I don't have to use the increment operator to increment it by 1. I could increment by multiples. And let's go ahead and comment this out. So for example, if we just do a quick review, we have the do loop, we have the while loop. Here we have the for each loop. For each loops are really good if I want to iterate over an array. And then I have these for loops at the bottom. And let me unhighlight this for loop just to show you the increment operator here. So the increment operator is here, but if I want to do all the numbers between 0 and 10, let's say, and I want to increment by 2, I could easily do that here. So now this loop is going to run. I'm going to echo out all those numbers, and I'm seeing 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, because once it gets to 10, 10's not less than 10, 10's equal to 10, and it won't do the loop. So those are the different types of loops. We got a for loop, we got a for each loop, we got a while loop, and a do loop. I want to come back for one final thing about our for each loop. When I'm incrementing over arrays, sometimes it's nice to have the index or the key, let's say, for the array. And so what I'm going to get here is, now this is going to be a number that's going to be the index of the elements. The first time through, color will be red, index will be 0. And I can see this if I echo, let's do the index at the very top, and I'm going to echo the index without any space. And if I put a, how about we do this? We do a dash, and I'm going to end it like that. So I'm going to end up with the index 0 dash, and it's going to come through here and do this logic. If you remember the last time we did this, we broke out of it really early by having this red code. I'm just going to comment all of this stuff out because we don't want that at all. In fact, I'm going to just delete it so that we can just see here easier. Now that we're here, I might as well do this. Okay, so we're down to a single line. I have this array colors for each of those elements. I put the value here, and this is the index. And if I run this, you'll see I have 3 in the loop. That's this thing. It's echoing out that. I'm just going to comment that out so we don't get confused. I have the element at index equal to 0 is red. The element when index is 1 is green. And the element when index is 2 is blue. But I also, in a previous video, I talked about associative arrays. And I might have an array that has, you know, data, say, about a person. So here's an associative array. If I iterate over that associative array, what I'm going to end up with is, instead of an index, I'm going to get a key, and then I'll have the values. So I can take this same thing, and let's go ahead and print it here, but instead of having an index, I'm going to have a key, and instead of a color, I'm going to have a value. And I'm going to print this out. Let's see what it looks like. You can see the color array was looped over here, and here's the person array. All of the elements were looped over, but now, so you can see that this value is associated with that key. And the same is true up here. So this color is associated with that index. So technically, under the hood, this is an associative array, but the association, the keys aren't really seen and they're not really present like visually. But here, this is an associative array, but the keys are seen. So normally people will just call this a regular array, and this is an associative array. You can use for each to loop over both of those. All right, so that wraps it up for looping. You know, we have a bunch of different ways that we can loop. We got for each, you got for loops, you got while loops, and you got do loops.